to introduce our state coordinator, Mary John Saletti.
Wow, this is awesome. Thank you all so much for being here this evening. I just want to take a little time here to thank a couple people. Catherine Higgins, Susan Buckmaster, Chris Toby, and of course our host for the evening, Chris Thieneman. I feel like I've kind of come full circle here because Bobby and I actually worked together in Senator Edward Kennedy's presidential campaign in 1980, and I never thought I would be standing here and helping in a campaign for president for Bobby. So I'm so thankful that I'm here. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yeah. No, nobody can see me. That's okay. No, what I was saying is Bobby and I have come full circle. I actually met Bobby. We worked in Senator Edward Kennedy's campaign for president in 1980, and now I'm standing before you helping Bobby become the next president of the United States. And this is so after about 40 years of friendship, I finally get to say, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the next president of the United States, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Thank you, Chris Thieneman, who's our host tonight and an old friend of mine, and I'm very grateful that he came up to my announcement in Boston in March. And I'm so grateful to this huge crowd of people from Louisville. I met Mary John, and she said in 1980 her dad was the mayor of Louisville for many years. And he chaired my uncle's campaign when he ran in 1980 for president. So I ended up staying at their house for a long time and campaigning all over the state with them. And we've been friends ever since. And I'm really, really grateful to be here in Louisville with Mary and with all of you, or Mary John, with all of you, with all of our friends here tonight. I was in San Francisco about 3 weeks ago, and I spent the better part of 2018 in San Francisco because I was trying the Monsanto cases. And we had 2,200 cases against Monsanto by home gardeners who had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from using Roundup. And we tried the way you do multi-district litigation, you try each case one at a time, usually in front of the same judge, until ultimately the defendant comes to the negotiating table. So we tried 3 of those cases in a row, and then Bear settled with us, took Roundup off the market for home gardening, and we made a $13 billion settlement. But I was there for most of the year, and every morning before court, I would go to a gym in Union Square. Union Square in San Francisco is like Fifth Avenue in Boston. It's the big, high-end shopping region of the city. And it has all the big flagship stores from the iconic American brands like Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom's, Macy's, Gap, Old Navy, Levi, and all the big foreign brands like Prada, De La Valle, Gucci, Ferragamo, Burberry. Big headquarters stores. And people come from all over the world to shop there. I went back 3 weeks ago, and all of those stores are closed. And it's acre after acre of plywood. And it's as if all of Fifth Avenue is shut down, with no stores left on Fifth Avenue. And the reason is the chaos on the streets right now in San Francisco. The explosion of homelessness, which has made it feel unsafe to shop there. unsanitary, their shoplifting is off the charts. You know, all the stores closed down, and the heart is ripped out of that city. To me, it's the most beautiful city in our country, and it was my favorite city. So I felt all traumatized after the day I spent there in Union Square. And I started studying the issue of homelessness, what caused it, because California is we have in this country 525,000 people are homeless, but half of them are in California. California only has 12% of the population. So I was trying to figure out, why is this happening? And my bias going into that kind of learning experience was that homelessness was linked to drug addiction, it's linked to mental illness, it's linked to extreme poverty. And also, my assumption was that if somebody went homeless in New York or Detroit, that they would naturally want to go to San Francisco because the weather's better and because they have a very famously generous social service system. And also, I heard from people in San Francisco that police in Dallas and Austin and other cities, when they pick up a homeless person, instead of bringing them to the county jail, they give them a one-way bus ticket to San Francisco. This is what people in San Francisco told me. And I started researching. My son Connor introduced me to this very famous researcher called Matthew Desert, who's written these seminal works on homelessness, including a very famous book called Evicted. And I listened to a lot of his lectures and podcasts. And what he shows in that book, first of all, he went around, he took a lot of University of San Francisco researchers, and they gave questionnaires and did interviews with thousands and thousands of homeless people in San Francisco. And what he shows in the book is that the people in San Francisco who are homeless are from San Francisco. Very few of them come from outside the region. And that drug addiction, there's areas in this country that have much higher levels of drug addiction and poverty. For example, West Virginia and Detroit, much higher. San Francisco is the richest city in this country. And those places do not have homelessness problems like anywhere near what San Francisco has. And what he shows also is that mental illness is not a big factor. People become homeless, quickly become mentally ill. People start, their psyche begins deteriorating after about 3 days on the street. So there's a high level of mental illness among the homeless, but it's not what caused the homelessness. And what he shows, the only common variable in places with high homelessness is high housing prices. That's what's causing homelessness. And what he shows is this epidemic of homelessness that we see in California is building like a tsunami, and it's about to roll across the country and infect all of our neighborhoods and bring along with it the social and financial disintegration that we see in the California cities, particularly San Francisco. And that's because this dramatic rise in housing prices across this country. In the last 2 years, housing prices have risen from $215,000 to $400,000, and the interest rates on those houses have gone from 3% to 7%. So that house will cost a young couple who's trying to get into a single-family home. It'll now cost 4 or 5 times what it did 2 years ago, and even 2 years ago they were having trouble. Oh, we have a whole generation of kids. I have 6 kids. I have 7 kids. One of them is 39 years old. He owns a house. I have 6 between 20 and 32, and all of them went to good schools. All of them have good jobs. None of them are even considering getting a house, because it's so far out of reach of anything that they can imagine. For my generation, the central promise of the American dream was that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could finance a home. You could have a summer vacation. You could raise a family. You could put something aside for retirement on one job. There's nobody in my kids' generation who believes that that promise applies to them. And I saw a poll, a very, very troubling poll 3 weeks ago that showed that in 2013, 85% of American kids between 18 and 34 years old said they were proud of the United States of America. The same poll taken 3 weeks ago shows only 17% say that. So somehow in the administration of the last two presidents, this entire generation of children has been shattered with disillusionment about their own hopes for their future and about their ideas and their visions about this country. And why is this happening? Why are housing prices, everything's going up, of course. And inflation, that we see for housing, for healthcare, for childcare, for food, is caused by inflation. And the inflation is caused by something obvious. We spent $8 trillion that we didn't have on wars over the past 20 years and $16 trillion on COVID. You got nothing back in return. $24 trillion printed money ultimately is going to lead to inflation. It's a tax. Politicians don't have the guts to come and say, we're going to tax you, but we're going to spend this on war, we're going to about your wage. Here's what's going to cost you. So they stealth tax in the end through this stealth tax called inflation, which disproportionately leans on the poor, on the working poor, people on salaries, people on fixed income. But it doesn't explain housing. Housing is outpacing everything. And why is that? Here's the reason. There are three giant companies, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And these companies all own each other. So it's really one large company. BlackRock's the biggest company in the world. It has $10 trillion under management. It has an economy, the GDP of California is $3 trillion. And California is the fifth largest economy on Earth. BlackRock is the third largest economy on Earth, after China and Russia. These three companies collectively own 88% of the S&P 500. So they own all the business in this country. And they've now targeted the land. They're buying agricultural land and they're buying residential housing. And they've already got, and corporations now own 5% residential housing, mainly these three companies. And they're, under this trajectory, they will own between 40 and 60% within 6 years. And we're going to be moving from a ownership society to a society of renters. And when that happens, we move from being citizens to being subjects. Home ownership is absolutely critical for democracy. Thomas Jefferson said American democracy is rooted in tens of thousands of independent freeholds owned by families and Americans, individual American citizens, each with a stake in our system. If you own a home, you care about your community. You care about the schools, you care about the roads, you care about the police, you care about the hospitals, you care about the appearance of your home. You care about your neighbors, you're part of that community, but more importantly, you have an entree to the capitalist system. Because if you have equity, you can borrow money, which means that if you have an entrepreneurial impulse, you can pursue it. You can get a second mortgage, and you can buy something really small, like a sewing machine, or you can bet it all on a restaurant or a retail outlet. And I grew up in a period called the Great Prosperity, economists call it Great Prosperity, the 50 years after World War II, when the American middle class became the greatest economic engine in the history of mankind. When my uncle was president, I was a little boy, our country owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. We were the biggest exporters of goods in the world. And that era was kicked off by a housing boom that began immediately after World War II, when the GI Bill and a number of other pieces of legislation put an entire generation of Americans into homes. And because they were in homes, they had the capacity to invest in their communities, in businesses, and we had this extraordinary demonstration of what Franklin Roosevelt called America's industrial genius. where we created the middle class and they created businesses which were the generator of wealth. Well, today we're going in the opposite direction. We're going in the direction that is more of a colonial model. It is more of a feudal model where an oligarchy, a new oligarchy, a corporate kleptocracy, I would call it, will control the landscapes and control the businesses and control all of and make all the economic decisions and take away our economic sovereignty. And our kids today this generation of kids, they go out, everybody has a story. First of all, everybody knows kids who are, that age, who are still living with their parents who shouldn't be. And we all know stories. We have somebody who knows a story about a friend who was about to go into escrow in a home, who was about to sign a contract, and somebody comes in at the last minute with a cash offer that's 20% higher than market rates and takes that home off the market. And then you say, who was this guy? And it's an LLC with an ambiguous name. And if you follow the breadcrumbs, it leads back to BlackRock. So, I'm running against two presidents right now. And our kids, by the way, when they go out and bid on a home with their, they are bidding against the price of money that is paid by BlackRock, which is about a third less than the person with the best credit rating in this country. So you're competing, with your cost, like our kids' cost of money is many, many times what BlackRock is paying, so there's no way they can compete against them for the decent housing in the marketplace. I'm running against two presidents who are both running on the platform that they brought extraordinary prosperity to this country. When I talk to regular Americans, and that's what I do every day, not only from the 6 months that I've been campaigning across the country, but also for the last 40 years. I represent people who have been injured by big industries, by big corporations. Right now, I'm representing 1,000 families in Columbiana County, Ohio, East Palestine, whose lives were upended by the Norfolk Southern spill. Until I won the case recently, I was representing 10,000 families in Spelter, West Virginia, who were poisoned by a zinc smelter there. I represent, again, until we settled this case recently, 10,000 families up the Ohio River on both sides of the Ohio, West Virginia and Ohio, who were poisoned by DuPont's C8 factory, by PFOAs and PFASs. And all over the country have cases like this, so I end up sitting at kitchen tables with Americans a lot and hearing what they're living like, and when they're told that a presidential candidate is saying that they're living in prosperity, they feel that they're being gaslighted. The average income in this country is now $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs of food, transportation, and housing, and not even good food, just food. The food, not Whole Foods. The food you get, at McDonald's or a grocery store that is very low on nutrition and very high on atrazine and glyphosate and neonicotinoid pesticides, and is contributing to the chronic disease epidemic that is ravaging the middle class in this country. And because they're ending up with just the bare minimum of what you need to live, there's still $5,000 in debt at the end of the year. How are they paying that debt? They're putting it on their credit cards. So 3 weeks ago, we passed a critical milestone of $1 trillion in private credit card debt. We've never had that kind of debt before in history. It's gone up $330 million in 3 years. And the companies that own that debt, the credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, Wells Fargo, Chase, Citibank, and Morgan, are charging 22% interest. If the mafia did that, they would go to what we call loan sharking, and they go to prison. But for these companies, it's business as usual. Who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock. Exactly. So they're doing it right in front of us, and they don't care that we know about it. And they're strip mining the wealth and the equity from the American middle class, and they're bringing it upward. You know, during COVID, we saw them close down 3.3 million businesses overnight. No due process, no just compensation, no public hearing, no scientific citation shown. They just had one bureaucrat who's been there for 50 years, never been elected, who said shut them all down. And right now I'm suing Amazon and Elizabeth Warren for I had a book about the COVID lockdown, not the Fauci book, but another book that I did with Joe Mercola. And she asked Amazon to censor it, and they did. So Amazon got to shut down all of its competitors and then censored people like me who were criticizing the government policy that was making billions and billions for their company. And, you know, we all got a 2.5-year lesson in how to use Amazon. So I didn't know how to use Amazon prior to COVID. And I can tell you that it is magical. You find a picture of something you like, and you press the send button, and it's in your driveway the next day. Of course, that's very seductive. But the outcome of that is that all of the cost of that seduction is that all of these local retailers are now shut down. 41% of black-owned businesses that shut down during COVID will never reopen. A lot of those businesses had 3 generations of equity in them, 3 generations sweating to create wealth from their family that they could borrow on, that they could participate, that could contribute to their communities. On. And you know, we have that convenience, but what did we lose? We lost that local retailer who was paying taxes right here in Louisville, who was employing your kid during their summer vacation, who had the plaque on his wall of gratitude for the local Boy Scout troop, who was paying, for me, it was my local retailers in Mount Kisco, New York, and we're paying for my kids' hockey jerseys and for their Little League uniforms. And those people are gone now, and that money, you're paying them a little extra that you were paying them at the inconvenience. That money was recirculating again and again in our community and benefiting and enriching all of us. And they're gone now. And all the money is going to Amazon. But at least Amazon pays local taxes here in Louisville, right? No. But at least they're paying federal taxes. Last year they paid 0. Like I said, they're doing it right in front of us. And who do you think the biggest owners of Amazon are? BlackRock and Vanguard, which own each other. So, and what's happening to local Americans? I sit at kitchen tables with elderly Americans who are making choices that I never thought an American would have to make. Elderly who are seniors who are splitting their pills up to make their prescriptions last a week so they can afford food. Mothers who are downgrading the ingredients that they buy in order to make it through the checkout line. A young kid who came up to me 3 weeks ago who said, every Tuesday, I have to make a choice between whether I'm going to have a meal that day or whether I'm going to buy gas for my car. And, a young couple that I talked to recently, sitting in their rental apartment they can no longer afford because 48% of renters can no longer afford their homes because the upward pressure from this consolidation of ownership that's happening is driving the rental prices up. Sitting in their home with a baby crying in their lap, having to wonder whether that child is $50 sick or $100 sick or $1,500 sick before they bring them to a hospital. And 57% of Americans, that's more than half, cannot put their hands on $1,000 if they have an emergency. If you're in that category and the engine light comes on in your car, it's the apocalypse. Because you can see the future and you can see your life circling the train. You know you're not going to be able to pay the mechanic. Your car is going to die. You're not going to be able to get to work. you're going to lose your job, then you're going to lose your apartment, and then you're going to end up on the sidewalk like all those people in San Francisco who weren't mentally ill, who weren't drug addicted, who just had a bad streak of luck, who had an engine light come on in their car, or they had 2 flat tires at the same time. And you know what it's like to drive around with a gas gauge on empty in your car, and the anxiety that gives you and how it focuses your mind, it makes you stupider. It lowers your IQ because you can't think of anything else. Now, amplify that anxiety by putting 2 kids in the back seat. And now you're driving through a bad neighborhood. And that's the level of anxiety that half the people in this country wake up with every day, this sense of impending doom. And they can't shake it, because every time they think about their future, they can't see how it's going to work financially. That's not the world that I grew up in. And that's not the world that I want my kids to grow up in. I want my kids to have hope. I want them to love our country. I want them to have faith in the country the way that I did. When I was a boy, let me just say this. I saw President Biden the other day. He was in Hawaii, and he had come back from Vietnam, and he gave a 9/11 speech. At the end of that speech, he said, they blew up the World Trade Center because they hated us for our freedoms. This surprised me to hear him say that, because that's what George Bush said back in 2001. And Democrats have ridiculed him for it, because it wasn't true. And the next day, I went on Neil Cavuto, and I said, he said that was propaganda. It's not true. He said, no, it's not true. Osama bin Laden was very clear about why he bombed the World Trade Center. He said he bombed it because we put 2 military bases right next to Mecca. He said he loved the United States before that. He fought with us. We supported him and financed him in the Afghan war. We supplied him. We helped him throw the Russians out of Afghanistan. He looked at us as a partner until we put the military bases in Mecca. We have 800 bases now all over the world, and each one is picking a fight with somebody. Oh, it's not making us safer. It's making it more dangerous to be American here and abroad. And I grew up in this era when everybody wanted American stuff. When I traveled abroad as a kid with my dad, or when I was a teenager, strangers would come up to me very reliably and ask to buy my blue jeans. They wanted American transistor radios. They wanted RCA controllers. They wanted our television. We were the only people in the world making television sets. We invented them. They wanted American automobiles. We were the gold standard automobile in the world. But more than important than anything, they wanted our leadership. They knew the difference between leadership and bullying, which our leaders have now forgotten. And they wanted our moral authority. They looked to us for that. I went to Poland with my dad in 1964, and 3 of my siblings and my mom. Poland at that time was a communist country. They didn't want us there. My father went at the invitation of a democracy advocate, and the Polish government blacked out any mention of our family's presence on the state-owned media, which was all the media in the country. In fact, the day before we went, my mother took us downtown Washington to go shopping to buy gifts for children, clothing and toys, American-made stuff, in an orphanage in Warsaw that we were going to bring presents to, and we were all excited that we were going to bring these presents to children. But when we got to the orphanage, the Polish government had removed all the children because they didn't want any contact between Polish people and us. The next day, we went to Krakow to visit the Cathedral of Black Madonna and to meet the cardinal there. The cardinal was a living saint. He had stood up to the communists. He had been tortured. He'd been jailed. The dignity and piety with which he endured that suffering had inspired a huge religious reawakening in Poland, in the Catholic Church. And everybody knew that when he died, as soon as he died, he was going to be beatified by the Catholic Church. So for us, I grew up with 11 siblings, and we read every night of my life growing up, we read the lives of the saints. and before our nightly prayers. So for us, little Catholic kids, it was the most exciting day of our lives that we were going to meet an actual living saint. And when we went up the stairs of the cathedral, Krakow Square was dead empty. The only thing in it was the embassy limousine that had brought us there. When we came out 3.5 hours later, there were 1 million people waiting for us. And the word of our presence had spread by word of mouth. And all the shops had closed in Krakow, and the population had emptied into the square because they wanted to be near an American leader. My uncle had died a year before, and my father had taken kind of the mantle in the minds of many Europeans of American leadership. And the limo was trapped in this sea of humanity. My father, for 2.5 hours we were there, my father pulled us out of the back window of the car onto the roof, and then he gave a speech from the roof to this crowd. And I don't know, he spoke in English. I don't know if anybody understood him, but they cheered loudly. And then they started singing to us. They sang "Sto Lat," which means "May you live forever." And then they sang an anthem that was banned in Poland. It was an anti-communist anthem. It had been a national anthem prior to the communist takeover. And it was illegal. It was a criminal act to sing it. And they sang it again and again and again to us for hours. And I was standing there, an 11-year-old kid, signing autographs for the first time in my life, and watching this crowd with tears flowing down people's face of joy. People reaching out to touch any of us, touch my dad. And this electricity in the crowd and excitement at being near an American. That same trip, we went to Greece, we went to Italy, to France, Germany, and England, and we saw the same crowds everywhere we went. People pouring out onto the street just to be near an American politician. They didn't hate us for our freedoms. They loved us for our freedoms. They started hating us when we betrayed our freedoms. And when we betrayed the values that had made us a world leader, our moral authority. And one of the reasons that there was such a reaction, an outpouring of affection of our country at that time, was because my uncle, John Kennedy, had made a strategic decision to keep the country out of war. 3 days before he took office, I was at his inauguration. Dwight Eisenhower, the outgoing president, gave a farewell address that should be regarded today as the most important speech in American history, where he warned Americans that the emerging military-industrial complex would subsume our role as the world's exemplary democracy and transform us into an imperium abroad and to a surveillance state, a security state, a garrison state at home, and that would erode the economic power of the American middle class. My uncle, when he came to office 3 days later, shared those same sympathies and fear and anxieties. And he encountered directly the power of the military-industrial complex 4 months into his office when the 3 top heads of the CIA and some of his Joint Chiefs of Staff, military brass, lied to him about the Bay of Pigs invasion. And when those men were dying on the beach, the worst moment of his presidency, he took the publicly took blame for it. But privately, famously, he said to his staff, "I'm going to take the CIA, shatter it into 1,000 pieces, and scatter it to the winds." In the next 3 months, 4 months, he fired the top 3 officers of the CIA, Charles Capel, Richard Bissell, and the founder director, Allen Dulles, who then, somehow ended up on the Warren Commission 3 years later. The next 3 years of his presidency were a pitched battle against his military-industrial complex, keeping our country out of war. He refused to go into Laos. The Pentagon called him a traitor. He refused to go into Cuba in 61 and 62. They again said it was an act of treason. He refused to go into Berlin in 62 during the Checkpoint Charlie crisis, and again, they said that was traitorous. And he refused to send combat troops to Vietnam. His top advisors, people who actually he loved, he trusted, Max Taylor, General Maxwell Taylor, Ava Herman, Bob McNamara, Dean Acheson, all told him, if you don't send 250,000 troops to Vietnam, the government's going to collapse. Every time he replied to him, it's their government. It has to be their war. It can't be American war. We can support them. We can't fight it for them. He ultimately sent in 16,000 military advisors. They weren't allowed to participate in combat under the rules of engagement. They violated that, and some of them did. But with fewer troops than he sent to Oxford, Mississippi to get one black man, James Meredith, into Ole Miss. It's the 60th anniversary last week of that. I talked to James Meredith last week. But on October 22nd, 1963, my uncle learned that one of the Green Berets had died. He asked his AWOL Rostow for a casualty list. Rostow came back and 75 Americans had been killed in Vietnam. He said, that's too many. I'm bringing them all home. That afternoon, he signed National Security Order 263. He ordered all military personnel out of Vietnam by 1965, with the first 1,000 coming home in December of 63, 5 weeks later. 30 days after he signed that order, he was murdered. And a week after that, Lyndon Johnson remanded that order, sent 250,000 troops over, and it became an American war. Nixon sent 560,000. We killed 1 million of them. 56,000 of our kids never came home, including my cousin, George Skakel, who died in a Tenerife. So, and those traumas, and then my father ran against the war in 68, won the Democratic primaries, and that night he was killed. Martin Luther King became a peace activist, and 2 months before, at the height of his peace activism, he was killed. And these traumas, my uncle's assassination, my father's assassination, King's assassination, the Vietnam War, 9/11 and COVID, each of those national traumas pushed us a little farther down that road that Eisenhower warned us against. Till today, we are a full-fledged garrison state, surveillance state, and the little indicia that we have left of democracy is almost like a Hollywood front. It's a kabuki theater. We vote, but do the elections actually, work? Are they fair? Do we actually have a democracy with debate and all the things that democracy is supposed to be, and exemplary democracy is the rest of the world? There's nobody that I talk to who believes that anybody in Washington, that their voices are audible, anybody in Washington, that they have anything to do with the government. It's far away, and it's owned by big shots like BlackRock and the military-industrial complex. Since then, since 9/11, 20 years, we've spent $8 trillion on wars, unnecessary wars, and fruitless wars. $8 trillion of it in half. And we got nothing for it. We're worse off. It's more dangerous to be in our country. We have fewer friends around the world. The Iraq war alone cost about half that, and Iraq is worse off than we found it. We killed more Iraqis than Saddam Hussein. We killed 650 to a million Iraqis, 650,000 to a million. Iraq today is an incoherent battle between Shia and Sunni despots. We pushed Iraq into a proxy posture with Iran, which is this foreign policy outcome we've been trying to avoid for 2 decades. We created ISIS. The spillover war in Syria sent 2 million refugees into Europe. We destabilized every democracy in Europe for the next generations. The result is Brexit. So, of that refugee crisis. And the current riots that they're having in France, a direct outcome of our Syrian war. So that's what we got for $8 trillion. And now We're addicted to it. So we're back in war, we get $113 billion committed to the Ukraine in March, just to give you a gauge for what that is. The entire budget for EPA is $12 billion. That's it. That's all we have to spend on the environment in this country. Every year, $12 billion. With the $113 billion we sent in March, and the $24 billion that Congress, both houses, the Democrats and the Republicans, no, they're both the party for it, approved last week. So 140 is 12 times the annual budget of EPA. We sent to Ukraine, a country that most Americans can't find on a map. It has no strategic importance for a war that should have never happened. The Russians offered twice to settle at extremely beneficial and generous terms to us and the Ukrainians, and people in the White House State Department, Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, Avril Haines, and Victoria Nuland, forced Zelensky to tear up those agreements because we wanted the war, they wanted the war. And that's just the beginning. Even if the war ends today, we'll spend $500 billion in Ukraine rebuilding. That's when the big money starts flowing. So, in March, when we approved $113 billion, that same month, we cut Medicaid to we cut food stamps to 30 million Americans from $283 a month to $23 a month. Try feeding yourself on $23 a month. We cut that same month Medicare to 15 million Americans completely. That same month, the Fed printed $300 billion unanticipated to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank. Twice what we sent to Ukraine. So when the bankers need it, and when the military-industrial complex, the contractors need it, the doors to the safe are wide open. When Americans are hurting, when they're broken, when they're starving, when they're sick, when our brothers and sisters need us, the doors slam shut.
Facts.
That month, Mitch McConnell was asked, I was confronted by a reporter saying, Republicans are supposed to care about budget deficits. They said, how can we send $113 billion to Ukraine? And he said, don't worry, it's not really going to Ukraine.
Yeah, right.
It's going to U.S. military contractors, to Raytheon, to General Dynamics, to Boeing, to Lockheed. So it's good for America, is what he said. So he just admitted it, right in front of us, that it's all a money laundering scheme for those guys. Who do you think owns every one of those companies? I saw Tim Scott during the Republican debate. All the Republicans, with the exception of VPAC, God bless them, all of them were trying to outdo each other to say that how much more they were going to give Ukraine. And then when we get down there, we're going to go to Mexico and get a war going there, and then we're going to go to China and get another one going. So, I forgot the name of the woman who was questioning him. She said, can we really afford that? So Tim Scott pipes up, and he says, don't worry. It's not a gift to the Ukraine. It's a loan. So, how many people here think that loan's getting paid back? Nobody. Everybody knows it's not. Nobody thinks that loan's getting paid back. So why do they even bother calling it a loan? They call it a loan because if you call it a loan, you can impose loan conditions in your contract. What are those loan conditions? First, a dramatic and brutal, barbaric austerity program and make sure that if you're poor in the Ukraine, you're going to get nothing. If you're starving, you get nothing. More importantly, it requires Ukraine to sell all its assets. So its roads, its ports, its airports, etc. to multinational corporations. Most important of all, it requires Ukraine to sell its biggest asset, its agricultural lands, the richest lands on earth. There's a joke about Ukraine lands, agriculture, but if you throw a boot on it, something will grow that you can eat. It's so rich, it's the breadbasket of Europe. There's been 1,000 years of wars fought for control of that land. It's the envy of every corporation on earth to get their hands on that land. There are 400,000 Ukrainian kids who have died in the last year to keep that land as part of Ukraine. And I doubt if any of them know that the contract requires Ukraine to sell it all to foreigners. And so far they're forced to create what they call land marking and put it all up for auction. 30% of it has already been sold. Who bought it? 3 companies, DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto. Who do you think owns every one of those companies? But that's not the big money. The big money comes from rebuilding Ukraine. So there's a contract for that too. And that was given out in December. Who do you think won that contract? BlackRock. So like I said, they're doing it right in front of us. They have a vacuum cleaner. During COVID, they shifted $4 trillion upward from the American middle class to the super rich. They created a new oligarchy of billionaires. They created $1 billionaire a day over the 500-day COVID lockdowns. 500 new billionaires. And that money, it was zero sum. It went straight up north. And it came from our communities. And they're doing it in front of us. They don't care that we know. They're just, and why? How can they get away with that? Here's how. They keep us all at each other's throats. Blacks against whites. They seed the hatred. Republicans against Democrats. Natives against immigrants, whatever they can. Just to make sure we're all fighting each other. And and they do that with these cultural war issues. If you go back and look at that Republican debate, nobody was talking about what's important, which is this, right? Nobody mentioned BlackRock or any of these things. They're all talking about 40-year-old issues that we all know can never be solved by politics because they're 50-50, whether it's guns or abortion or, and they're all important, or migrant, all important issues, really important. But they're on the margin. They're not the most important, the central issue, which is the sovereignty of our people, the welfare of the American middle class, and our democracy. And when the king and queen look over the balustrades of their castle and they see their subjects all fighting each other, they go back to the banquet and they pop champagne corks. Because as long as everybody's fighting each other, nobody's coming over the castle wall. And what my objective is over the next 13 months of my campaign and over the years of my presidency is to end that bickering and help Americans find the values that we share in common and focus on those rather than the little things that keep us apart. And then get everybody unified, and then let's go over the castle wall and take back our country. I avoid criticizing personally President Trump or President Biden or talk about their legal problems or their cognitive issues, and I focus on these issues that I find every day more and more of landscapes of things that Americans agree on are just so broad and wide. Everybody in this country wants to make sure we take care of our veterans. Everybody in this. Everybody in our country wants to make sure that our teachers have decent pays, that they have good lives, and that our children have the best education of any country in the world. Everybody wants to end the chronic disease epidemic and make sure we don't have poison in our food, that we're not all being mass poison and then mass propagandized that we're not being poisoned, which you know is happening every day. I mean, we're watching it. We're watching chronic disease go from 6% to 60%. And this entire generation of disabled kids that all have allergies and anaphylaxis and rheumatoid arthritis and juvenile diabetes and Crohn's disease, all these autoimmune illnesses that we never heard of before, and that are in every classroom loaded with EpiPens. I never knew anybody with a peanut allergy. I have 11 siblings, 70 cousins. Never knew anybody with a peanut allergy. And, but 5 of my kids had it. What happened? Something happened in 1989. And we should end it. We know it's environmental exposure. We know it's a narrow number of things that it could possibly be. NIH makes sure that's never studied. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get in there and we're going to identify it. Everybody wants a clean environment. Why are we only focused on one environmental issue? Climate. Why is that it? We have the Appalachian Mountains being cut down. 500 biggest mountains have been blown up. We're exploding tons of ammonium nitrate, the equivalent of a Hiroshima bomb once a week in Appalachia. We flatten an area larger than the state of Delaware. Is our Purple Mountains majesty. This is the landscapes where Danny Boone and Davy Crockett roamed. Our music, our culture comes out of, our democracy comes out of those landscapes, that beef jerky toughness of our people. And nobody wants those cut down. If people saw it, they wouldn't want it. And nobody wants mercury in our fish. Nobody wants acid rain that has destroyed the forest cover on the Appalachians from Georgia to northern Quebec. I'm watching. I'm a ocean person that grew up on the ocean. I'm watching the shellfish beds just disappear on the East Coast. The oysters, the clams, the cohog, because the bivalves, the ocean's now so acidic, the bivalves can't metabolize calcium out of the water column. And we're seeing these fisheries collapse. Nobody wants that. And when you talk about those issues, the sacred places, everybody agrees on it. When we were fighting the contamination of water in Detroit, we had Hell's Angels standing side by side with local black families, because nobody wants it. We're all at Standing Rock, same thing, Republicans and Democrats, because they were focused on protecting this sacred place. And every American is behind that. We all want to provide our children communities that give them the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us. Nobody in this country, when you ask them, do you like censorship? None of them do. Everybody wants an immigration policy that allows immigrants to come in legally, and gives them a quick path to citizenship and gets the people we need. Nobody wants the Mexican drug cartels running our immigration policy. I've been able, going around the country and talking about those issues rather than focusing on the culture war issues. I've been able to put together crowds like that. There's no political presidential candidate now that can put together a crowd like this except for Trump. President Biden couldn't put this crowd together. We're doing it in every city. We have 220,000 volunteers. We have 10 times the volunteers that anybody else has. We have an energy behind this campaign tired of the bickering. They don't want it anymore. And they can agree on I'm not always going to agree with you on everything. But I'm always going to respect you. I'm always going to listen to you. I'm always going to give you a hearing and a rational answer. And people want that now. They're willing to look beyond these culture war issues. And I said, when I made my announcement in Boston, I said, you give me a sword and a piece of ground to stand on, and I will win our country back. I need your help. I cannot do it alone. I need the help of all of you. And there's a ton of ways you can help me. Go on Kennedy24.com. And if you can send $5, do that. If you can send any amount of money, do that. If you can't do that, we need volunteers. We need to get on the ballots. We need 1 million signatures. And we need an army out there to get them for us. And we need you to convert people. So here's the thing, is I'm allowed to go on Fox News. So people who watch Fox News have heard me talk. People who have podcasts have heard me talk. And that's where most of the people in this room come from. But if all you watch is CNN, MSNBC, and New York Times, if I lived at that information level, I would have a very low opinion of myself. They won't let me talk. Now, none of those people have heard me. All they've heard is these mischaracterizations of what I supposedly believe in and what I supposedly have said. And nobody, I'm never allowed to explain anything or to deny anything. So that's what they believe. And somehow we have to get to those people. And the way that we're getting to them is by people like you. When you leave here tonight, buy a Kennedy button and then wear it. Get a Kennedy bumper sticker, get a merch, get a shirt from those guys out. I love these guys. They're making a killing on my campaign. I wish we had figured that out before we started. They're really great guys, but get a t-shirt, wear that bumper sticker, take home a lawn sign, we give them away free at the door. People will come up to you. Most people who put out my stuff, they tell me that they get very, very good reactions. 90% very good. And about 10% are people who come up and say, why do you like them? And with those people, you could say, just listen to a Rogan podcast or, all in the podcast. Because what we find is when they get to listen to that, they convert very quickly. We have a really high conversion rate. And that, all of us, and COVID and all of this stuff has divided families. You don't have to get in a fight with people. Just go listen to that podcast. And we do that. We can stop looking at the jangling keys. That's what they're doing. They're jangling. The culture wars, the jangling keys over there while they're robbing the bank over here. And we need to start focusing people on this hand to see what they're doing. And when you do that, when you explain these things to people, they react appropriately. And so I want to thank all of you for being here. Thank you for your help in this campaign. I'm going to answer a couple of questions. I have to drive to Cincinnati tonight, so I can't answer them all the time. But after the question period, I'm going to take pictures with everybody in the crowd who wants to take a picture. So, that might seem insurmountable. I think there's about 300, 400 people in this room. We did 600 people in Charleston the other day in 24 minutes. We have a system that if you cooperate, it's really, really fast. And you have to walk fast, and you can talk to me while you're walking. And I can't sign anything because I'll be here till morning. But anyway, we can get it done. I'll take a picture with each one of you, and I look forward to meeting you and shaking your hand. And let me take a couple of questions before we do the selfie line. Yes.
I want to thank you for your boldness. I want to thank you for your bravery. I have a question. Your elected president, President Robert F. Kennedy Jr., 8 years, and the historians are writing your legacy. What do you want your legacy as president to be?
The question is, what do I want my legacy as presidency? That I unraveled, that I unwound the empire. That I dropped military expenditures to $500 billion a year from 1.3 trillion. That I closed most of the bases abroad. We need to protect our borders, arm ourselves to teeth at home, make ourselves too expensive to ever invade. We need to protect the sea lanes. We need to protect the Arctic and other neutral areas. And we need to be able to inflict punishment on people who do really bad things around the world.
Yes.
We need that capacity, but we can do that for half of what we're paying for our military right now. We don't have to spend more than the next 10 nations combined, which is what we're planning on spending now. It's weakening us. My grandfather always said in the military that the real strength of a nation comes from is economic power. And I'm going to project economic power around the globe instead of military power. Number two, I ended the chronic disease epidemic, which I will do in 8 years. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans have chronic disease. Today, approximately 60% do. And the biggest cost to our economy, twice the size of our war addiction, is chronic disease. We spend $4.3 trillion on healthcare, far more, 2 or 3 times per capita than any European nation spends, any other nation in the world. We have the worst health outcomes. We're 79th. We're behind Costa Rica, behind Nicaragua, behind Cuba, behind Mongolia. And I'm going to end the chronic disease epidemic. 3.7, about more than 80% of our healthcare costs are going to chronic disease. And it's bankrupting us. Within 6 years, the cost of autism alone will be $1 trillion a year. We went, in my generation today, 1 in 10,000 60-year-old men have autism. 1 in 10,000. Our kids' generation's 1 in every 34. 1 in every 22 boys. And I'm going to end that. Oh, it's coming. To Israel, yeah, with Ukraine, I will negotiate a settlement of the war with Putin, with Russia, whoever I need. Zelensky's tried. Zelensky promised to sign the Minsk Accords in 2019 when he ran. He won 70% of the vote because he was a comedian who, he dressed in weird costumes. And he became president because he promised peace. He promised to sign the Minsk Accords, which were a very reasonable agreement, and Russians already signed on to it. We wouldn't let him sign it. And then in April 2022, he went, because we wouldn't help him negotiate, he went to Israel and Turkey and asked them to negotiate, and they put together another agreement, which would have left Donbass and Lugansk in the hands of Ukraine as semi-autonomous regions. All the Russians really wanted was an agreement to keep NATO out of Ukraine. And he signed it, the Russians signed it, Putin was withdrawing his troops from Ukraine. And then Biden made Boris Johnson go over there and force Zelensky to tear it up. And since then, we've killed 400,000 kids. I would settle it. And we're not going to get the kind of terms we would have, but we'll get the best terms that we can from the Russians. And on Israel, Israel's our most important ally in the Mideast. Israel will never ask us to fight a war for them. They never have, they never will. The reason Israel is important to us is because it's a bull bulwark, is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's been our oldest ally, 75 years. And it serves as a bulwark against encroachments by the great powers. So right now, the biggest allies of Iran are China. That's the number one ally. And then Russia. And Iran controls Venezuela. Hezbollah is now all over Venezuela. The Iranian Navy is in Venezuelan port. Iran is there to prop up Maduro. And Maduro's given Iran control over Venezuelan oil. So if Israel's like our aircraft carrier in the Middle East, it's a bulwark against the expansion of those powers. And if Israel disappears, it's the only democracy in the region. And so there's a moral case for it, but more importantly, from national security standpoint, Russia and China will now control 90% of the oil in the world. And that will be a national security catastrophe for the United States, and we can't allow it to happen. We need to support Israel. You know, what's happening with Hamas is very complicated. I could talk about that all night. I know a lot about it. But I'm not going to go into it now. I'm just going to say it's a terrible tragedy, and we should pray for all the people in the Middle East, and particularly the children who are suffering so terribly. But anyway, yeah, I would provide support for them. Like I say, they will never ask us for troops.
When will you let us know who your VP?
I think pretty soon.
Soon?
I think pretty soon. I'm hoping pretty soon. Yeah.
Do you have a plan for voter corruption, fraud, those kind of things, all kinds of things?
Yeah, I mean, voter, first of all, I have two things. Number one, you know, I wrote an award-winning article in 2004 in Rolling Stone about the deep vote machines and about the potential to fix elections. And you know, I talked to every expert at that point, and everybody who's reasonable about it says you need paper ballots in every location. So I would do that. And, you know, I have another innovative plan, which is this. That I'm going to, the day that I get into office, I'm going to order the Post Office and the State Department to make passport IDs available to every American who can't afford them for free. Now, what that will do is the Democrats worry about, you know, they have anxiety that if we pass a law that says you need voter ID to vote, that is prejudice against Democratic voters because a lot of Democratic constituencies do not have driver's licenses. If you're a minority living in a city, the chances are you don't have a driver's license. Elderly people with expired license who are disproportionately Democratic voters also don't have licenses, and then a lot of students don't have licenses. So Democrats fight any requirement to have voter IDs at the voting booth. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so everybody can get an ID. Right now, it's $65 to get a you know, you need a government issued photo ID. Right now it's $65, which is a bad barrier. You know, nobody wants. You can get an ID from DMV, but it's like going to purgatory for a year. We all know that, right? And so people won't do it, and then the DMV offices, sometimes there's places in this country where the nearest one is 75 miles. So it's very, very difficult, and so what I'm going to do is you can get a passport ID at any post office. There's 33,000 post offices in this country, and I'm going to make it so you can go down there, you show proof of citizenship, you get an ID. What this will do is two things, three things. One, if you don't have a photo ID in this country, you're a second-class citizen. You can't get a bank account. You can't cash a check. You have to go with your Social Security check to a check casher, and he's taking 10% of your check. You can't check into a hotel. You can't board an airplane. You can't visit your child at school. This is going to solve that problem. It will also eliminate the problem. We have Al Sharpton and Andy Young, the other civil rights leaders, are now all behind this idea and have said, and if we do this, if we make this available to all Americans, like I'm saying, that they will lift any objection to having a ID requirement at the voting booth. So that will get rid of the Republican anxieties that, there's widespread voter fraud. Because everybody will have an ID. I'll tell you what else it will do. It will end the border crisis overnight. Because right now, like a construction firm in New York, 110,000 illegal migrants in New York. The unscrupulous employers are paying them $6 or $7 or $8 or $10, maybe $12 an hour. That can't get them off the street, but they can get food, so they're doing it because they don't have any other choice. They're here for 7 years before they get an asylum court appointment, and they have no way to make money legally. Oh, the only thing is illegal for the employer to employ them, but all he has to do is show that he saw their Social Security card. Social Security card has no photo on it. They're notoriously easy to fabricate, and they're passed hand-to-hand by people. All the employer has to do is check that box, and he employs them. But if you say you can't employ anybody without a government-issued photo ID, and everybody has that passport card, and it ends illegal immigration in this country. Because the reason those people are coming in, the ones that shouldn't be coming in, is for a job. And if you cannot get a job, if the employer knows he's going to go to jail if he hires you without that, it will end it. Nobody will be coming across that border. So it solves all these problems in a very elegant way that Republicans and Democrats can agree on. It's I'm going to do that my first day in office. We asked Biden to do it 2 months ago, and he just refused. But it's it is a good solution, and we have the people who need to support it are already on board. I'm going to do one more, and then let me do that. Get back there. Yeah.
Thanks for coming. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press is really important to many Americans. If you're elected president, would you pardon Julian Assange?
Okay, people need to come in through this gap. We're going to be over here. Anybody wants a picture, we'll do it real quick.
I wanted to ask you about reparations. Right?
Make sure you have your cameras out, please. Your phones out, your cameras ready, and white buttons. If you would like a yard sign or a sign for volunteer, please check in with you outside. Thank you so much. And we're going to be taking the picture for you, so please hand it to these two gentlemen here when you come up.
Guys, can we make a little space over here, please?
And due to time restraints, you will not be signing anything.
I try to look right in the eye.
So just remember, have your camera open, facing the back camera. Myself, Jackson here will take the photo for you. You'll stand here, smile. We usually go 3, 2, 1, smile. Everybody smiles, we'll take the photo for you, and then you'll exit. But you cannot sign autographs tonight since we're on time restraints. Thank you so much.
I'm Jessica Stone, and I'm asking for your vote on November 7th for Family Court Judge. I have over a decade of legal experience, and I know family court inside and out. I can relate to those that find themselves in family court because I am a single mom and a survivor. I will work and fight for families just like I have fought for my own family. Vote Stone for Family Court Judge.
Vote Stone is a rock solid choice.
Hi. I know you want to get back to your live stream, but I want to take this minute to talk about Images by Patrick. Hi, I'm Patrick, and I've been a professional photographer for over 25 years, specializing in actors' headshots, professional headshots, family portraits, and much, much more. You can find me at www.imagesbypatrick.photography or find me on Facebook at Images by Patrick and get your image on. Now, back to your live stream.
If you do nothing else.
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 Stay live.